Better scramble like an egg before you get folded like...
Ooh, that brother's floating in the air. How could his hands do this? Oh, someone get him out the air.
Kratos vs Asura is potentially the saddest death battle episode I've ever seen. And unfortunately I'm not referring to intended emotional impact, which is something Death Battle got supremely better at in recent seasons. More so, the sadness of what could have been, the frustration of what was decided to be, and the unfortunate combination of many different factors negatively colliding one another, down to the very skeleton this fight was built upon. I'm probably uploading this video way too late to capitalize on the initial controversy while it was hot, but you know what, sometimes it's good to sit down and look back at things once the smoke clears. So join me as we get into what Asura didn't do too well, what I think he did do right, and yes, some good old debunking mixed with an overall review, like I did with the previous devilartemis animated death fight. And no, I don't think the episode disappointing just because I didn't get the verdict I was hoping for. If I were that superficial, I wouldn't be reviewing this show. Believe it or not, I am actually more inclined to believe in Kratos winning now, mostly thanks to people in the Death Battle community bringing up vastly better explanations and interpretations to support the outcome better than the ones Death Battle ultimately went for, funny enough, but more on that later. I'm still gonna go over what was either downright ignored, or at worst terribly misunderstood, for my boy Azuzu, and what may or may not been terribly inflated for Quay. Mr. Giraffe, consider this video my challenge glove gently slapping your cheek. Pause I guess, like and subscribe for more, and let's get it. Starting off on a high note here, because the breakdowns are, to be quite frank, the best part of this episode. Like a weird reverse twin of Cole vs Alex. Speaking of, wow, so Death Battle is able to go over a character from a dead franchise in a respectful fashion without extremely annoying jokes about how dead the dead franchise is. That's great. What's less great is the intro summary. Unfortunately, summing up the core connections between Kratos vs Asura as "cause sometimes you wanna punch a god in the face" serves as good foreshadowing for how little depth they're gonna give Asura in the actual fight. Despite the breakdowns highlighting how much he isn't just a mindless rage monster, or how Kratos is more than meets the eye, the more we go over this episode, the stronger I suspect that they realize what they did and try to salvage what they could. I'm getting ahead of myself here. Speaking of stuff that happened before, framing the entire God of War franchise as being literally built on a vicious cycle of violence, going from the war that shaped the universe as we know it to the war that shaped Kratos as the Ghost of Sparta, was chef kiss brilliant. As I said in my reaction, I really appreciate that they didn't try to quote badassify Kratos' pleas to Ares, unlike the second version that tried something like that.
Ares! Destroy my enemies, and my life is yours. Ares, destroy my enemies, and my life is yours!
Ares, destroy these guys who are kicking my ass, and my life is yours.
Instead poking fun about the fact that, yeah, Kratos' prideful refusal to admit defeat indeed led to him taking a shortcut that literally ruined his loved ones, and frankly everyone's lives. This is something that these breakdowns do really well, exploring the struggles and triumphs of both characters. Even though it looks like Boomstick is gonna revert to his old self and unironically praise Greek Kratos because yeah, sex, blood and titties, wait, they do over how empty it all felt even when he did kill all the gods. Good stuff. It is pretty funny however how they went over all of the arsenal Greek Kratos can brag about, only for his entire text wall to be irrelevant. Don't get me wrong, they do go over the main important stuff with the Blades of Chaos and Olympus respectively, but it really did not help with the high expectations I've had since the episode was announced, in which I always imagined Asura's many forms clashing with Kratos' many weapons because I don't know, they punched each other back to ancient Greece or something. Not even some alternate scenarios at the end, which was a bummer, like they did with Bowser vs Eggman. That episode definitely spoiled all of us in terms of what to expect for every death battle. That I won't deny, but you know, and as clever as it is to equate Asura with Kronos, as both having killed primordial deities, in vastly different contexts though, I still disagree about Kratos directly scaling to Kronos, since I believe it makes as much sense as me saying that I scale to Prime Mike Tyson simply because I can shoot him with a gun. But I do believe that scaling Kratos to Zeus instead, who definitely scales above Kronos and the rest, would fix that issue. Shout out to Lolbit. They did buy into the X being able to shatter souls, like I did, and I completely forgot about Valor restoring Kratos' health during my rundown of his stamina mine prediction vid. Props to the team for thematically tying that into the idea of anger being used for good, which is relevant for both characters. I still don't know about the whole absorbing energy ordeal for other weapons though, more on that later, and the whole "but hey, he didn't kill his wife this time" joke is pretty crazy, not gonna lie, it's like my god. But nothing beats the Thor Ragnarok joke. Replacing Hela with Thor, Thor with Kratos, but the punchline still being about Surtur, just brilliant usage of the meme there. The editing going over the world tree is pretty great too, ditto for describing Kratos' arc as going from a sword to a protective shield, a metaphor they use for Asura too, with the difference being that Asura was always a shield, that many try to use as a sword, and they do rightfully recognize this distinction. But as they end Kratos' rundown with a thematically pretty great usage of Valhalla footage and quotes, we get into Asura's and the Indian music in the background is nice, at least, and starting it as a tale of a demigod that fell from the heavens is pretty attention grabbing if you knew. Then, why this weird edit of that Power Rangers villain? What do you mean Asura is here to punch anything dumb enough to get in his way? That's Kratos. He isn't on a one-track path for vengeance that involves killing innocents and the guilty alike. And surely the people behind this episode understand that, right? Right? I do agree that Asura should be in Marvel vs. Capcom though, and I do stand by what I praised earlier regarding these breakdowns, but we gotta get into the bad stuff. They correctly go over how Asura's soul can be taken, rendering Kratos' soul stealing thing is useless, and they do go over how you would have to make sure not even a piece of Asura is left if you wanna put him down, then have him peacefully close his eyes in the animation proper, despite the vast majority of his body being perfectly intact, which made me finally understand how Bardock fans must have felt. Speaking of, remember how with Bardock they had to kinda, hype him up by saying he can hit you really hard in 4 different ways, almost as if they're trying to work their way backwards to make him sound as cool as possible, knowing how badly they're doing later. I had that exact same vibe when they emphasized Asura beheading someone so hard you wish you died faster. It's a well-known trope by now that whoever transforms first in that battle is usually the one bound to lose due to the inherent format of the show where the best is served for last, but I never expected that bleeding into the freaking analysis, as the speeds in which they get into Asura transformations is pretty staggering. It's also a really weird decision to completely ignore Asura's wrath being so powerful that allows him to adapt and gets exponentially stronger as the fight rages on, or better yet, tell me that Asura wouldn't reach his peak with a stranger like Kratos, because his beef with Chakravartin was personal. That I can believe. On a more positive note before I get into the fight, naturally Asura 2 ends is a surprisingly funny sentence, like the good twin of "unfortunately Zeus was horny." Boomstick ending the rundown by saying "now that's a god I can get behind," it's pretty sweet, since I always had the headcanon of him essentially seeing Asura as a spirit animal of sorts, since they're both protective deaths that are, let's say, more in tune with their face than their words. So basically getting a version of that in this episode was pretty sweet. And yes, beating the QTE out of God is as badass and accurate as it sounds. Setups have always been a major component for a good Death Battle animation in my eyes. Sure, every so often we get stuff like "you stole my sandwich, prepare to die," but with stuff like the prophecy clashing of Chosenborn or the character-driven drama of Homelander, I think it's safe to have higher expectations than usual for most Death Battle setups nowadays. Well, call me Nuke Top 5 because in this case, it did not go well. I don't understand what was so wrong about the one we got in the teaser trailer. Was it ambiguous and probably more of a proof of concept thingy? Sure. But I still think it's such a great introduction to Norse Kratos in my opinion. To just have him reflect on his past, the blaze of chaos lighting up, the voices of Zeus and Pandora, then later even Asura's echo in his mind, then his hand starts shaking as he tries to calm himself down. Some try to say it's out of character for Quake to still have such hand-trembling rage, but I don't really think anger is why he was shaking here. I always took it as him reliving so many traumatic moments in his mind in that moment that it literally leaves him shaken, Like when he tried to grab Heimdall's sword after killing him like his past self would. Like, did something happen here? Why is Asura on his doorstep? What brought him here? What are they gonna say? So many questions went to my head as I rewatched the trailer over and over, and I just couldn't wait to hear what these two were gonna talk about as soon as Kratos turned around. Then the actual episode dropped and there's good confusion and there's bad confusion. Why was Kratos teleported in this temple with Mitra in it? Did she summon him for some reason? As if that's something she can do now? Because if Mitra did summon him, that makes her implicit in Asura's death later on. Kratos beats up some robot guards and that alone makes it a fight for Asura in Asura's eyes. Kratos clears a whole room of thugs, and when he tells Asura he's not here to fight. What is going on? Are you broken? I think what we're trying to do here is say that Kratos has a premonition/dream about Asura arriving in his home, like he did with Thor, but then it's not an accurate depiction at all since it's him who goes to Asura, technically, not the other way around. Like, if there were ways to do a simple setup for this fight, guys. If you wanted Asura to be written as a parallel to the other two Aesir gods that showed up at Kratos' doorstep. Maybe have Odin manipulate Asura, telling him that Kratos is responsible for a big mass murder or something, not exactly inaccurate, and he's now acting as if he can just hypocritically just do a clean slate and start anew. That way you can merge Odin telling Baldur that Kratos is a giant who knows how to fix his curse, and Thor talking to Kratos about the whole
come here, become a daddy, get a clean slate. That ain't how it works.
Then you could have Kratos have the whole "we must be better" spiel, trying to discourage Asura from going through a path of wrath and vengeance. We will get over where the actual fight handles such concept, prompting Asura to press the X button to shut him up as they fly to the roof, while the camera pans to Mimir under the bed saying, "At this point we even fixed the bloody roof." That's the best Mimir impression you're ever gonna get out of me, by the way. On the positive side of things, however, I do like the Asura Wrath-esque title Kratos gets, as if he's one of the bosses Asura has to fight next, which later gets muddled by Asura getting one too, but I do like how serene and calm this overall first action feels. Really gives me the same vibes of that Asura's Wrath starting cutscene when they were at the palace, before hell broke loose I mean. I am very glad to see how, regardless was any analysis before or after the fight, Kratos is portrayed as a more skilled warrior while Asura is a supremely faster beast to keep up with. That just feels right to both characters. And into my own prediction video, but I digress. Then we then get some obligatory callbacks to the Baldur and Thor fights as expected. I especially like how Kratos towers over Asura here, but I just don't know about this location, man. Is it Asura's Wrath-esque? Sure, but we kinda have these tales that lead to nowhere, and the overall graphics kinda clash with the PS5 Kratos. I won't harp on it too much, but I do think a snowy forest would have been a vastly easier environment to find a 3D map of, in my opinion at least. I absolutely love the shot of Kratos being punched in the face with more hands than his face should handle though. That's pure Asura. In fact, he gets thrown around quite a lot early on in this fight, which is usually a bad omen for the person doing the throwing, going by how that battles usually go, and this time is no different. A major criticism I happen to agree with this fight, one of many, is the fact that Kratos gets no damage in general. Like, the whole fight is just Asura speedrunning to his many forms, as Kratos occasionally grunts and punches him to the next. It creates this deeply uneven dynamic, as if Kratos were just toying with Asura this whole time, as if it was never a close or debatable fight, which everyone will tell you is not the case no matter how you interpret it. Like, Bardock and Homelander managed to damage Nolan more than Asura did to Kratos. Homelander! Imagine if Dimitri won the fight by looking the exact same from beginning to end, no burnt cloak or stab back or nothing. It would just feel really annoying, wouldn't it? Play devil's advocate against my own point though, Kratos does block most of Asura's attacks while the latter kinda war dogs everything. And he doesn't bleed either, so there's that I guess. But still, the last time Kratos fought a straight brawler, he was messed up too, so it just rubs me the wrong way to act as if there isn't a model to use for that. And speaking of things rubbing me the wrong way,
You let your wrath consume you. I have been down that road before.
Shut up!
I get it. I literally proposed a scene like this a few minutes ago. But have I seen someone pointed out that this looks like something out of epic web battles of history? The way both Kratos look at the camera especially, I'm sorry, I just can't take this scene seriously. Perhaps for using the Valhalla Greek Kratos model, it would have been much more jarring to see the previous one here, but still, it doesn't work here because Asura never went to the mass murder rampage that would justify a parallel with God of War 3 Kratos of all things. Even the way Asura response doesn't work. Check the difference between the actual fight and this edit I saw on Reddit that recycles dialogue from the Argus fight.
You let your wrath consume you. I have been down that road before. I am nothing like you.
The former makes it sound as if Kratos is right and Asura just doesn't wanna hear it, but the latter makes it sound as if Asura fully recognizes what Kratos is implying with that similarity and is calling him out for even attempting to make such comparison. Especially since this version of Asura apparently knows of Kratos, it's almost as if this entire foundation of this fight is built upon a complete mischaracterization of the former. Despite my criticism regarding what they were paid to recite, Christopher Guerrero does an amazing job as Asura and Hussein Mohammed does a decent job with Kratos. Yeah, with the latter I can't help but hear someone trying to sound like Kratos rather than Kratos being Kratos. And also the way it evolves into Greek Kratos characterization at the end, for some reason, not even that, but because it talks about giving Asura a worthy death. What are you, that battle Kratos, a disciple of Battle Beast? And the old play on "that does not earn me" quote thingy. It's a cool line that fans rightfully quote all the time, but you would have to be careful about not getting lost in the sauce while incorporating it here.
No. Death can have me when it earns me.
Death has not earned me yet, Titan!
They got lost in the sauce while incorporating it here. Unlike the vast majority of Kratos dialogue callbacks, which at least try to mimic the original delivery, this one is just, wow, it was so badass when Kratos said that, oh my god, take that, yes! Kratos using his multiple spears to take down Asura's multiple arms was clever and pretty funny, I'll admit, even if a tad Looney Toony in execution. The animation as a whole is, again, with as much respect as possible towards devilartemis, as I know the animation process is no joke, is just really janky. And it somehow feels both too fast and too slow at the same time. It doesn't feel like 6 minutes at all. And I don't mean it in a time flies by sort of way, but more so in a that's it sort of way, unfortunately. Now granted, the colossal hype and expectations behind Asura did not help at all. Coming second place in 2 separate fan tournaments, a much longer waiting period full of speculation, devilartemis building this up as the longest animated fight is ever done, this matchup being especially contentious debate-wise, and the near limitless creativity both franchises provide animation-wise, I find it really hard to imagine a timeline where anything less than something on the level of Bowser Eggman wouldn't have ruffled some feathers. I know that's not fair in the slightest, but even with that in mind, thinking about it weeks later, this animation was just underwhelming. I was over here expecting stuff like Kratos vs Asura, punching each other to their respective underworlds, climbing back up as I think of Atreus and Mitra respectively, then the music kicks in full steam, the sheer strength breaking space-time as they end up in ancient Greece or something, giving Kratos his Greek arsenal, them having a quick time event off, the sound design that actually emphasized the might of each blow, and instead we got a confusing setup, Asura speedrunning through all of his forms in 2 minutes, while Kratos remains epically unfazed in both body and mind. There's also wonky callbacks, and you know what, the vast majority of what I'm listing here has nothing to do with devilartemis animation actually. No, my beef is whoever came up, wrote and approved such things, including the big fish we'll cover next. There are 2 things I can confidently say that Modern Death Battle has bragging rights over: hyper moments and respectful deaths. For the longest time, I really struggled to think about a Death Battle episode that lacks one or the other, but this is the first time where I see a Death Battle episode attempting and failing at both at once. I'm sorry. It doesn't come off as natural for me to be this harsh of a death battle episode. Why? So let me get into why that is. The idea of Asura using his destructor form to pull a Wizen on Kratos is something I've always been against. It works wonders for a track hardcover. Hell, both Asura or Kratos could be seen as the Goliath to each other's David, depending on where you sit on the lower versus feat spectrum, but incorporating that in the actual fight just doesn't work. Wizen did it because it was under the flawed idea that bigger equals more powerful, something Asura proved to not be the case. So him relying on a concept he knows firsthand is inherently flawed, is just character backtracking no matter how you look at it. Remember, the Asura who defeated our omnipotent creator deity was the base form one, not the big one. Like when Asura did it, he reunited all his courage, twirled the finger and lost all his arms in an attempt to destroy Wizen. When Kratos did it, he just opens his arms, makes its weird face, and the battle keeps going like normal. On that topic, this face. In my reaction video, I already knew it was gonna become a meme, because like, how couldn't it? The weird face close up, the quote anime character going insane camera zoom, what I've seen many interpret as a smirk, but I honestly just see a weird expression. But that's nothing to compare to the core issue of Kratos stealing Asura's most iconic moment, a gimme to a character who has never exhibited anything remotely close power-wise. Like, I know Kratos' whole thing in the Greek games was stealing other people's shit, and his power scaling reputation relies entirely on stuff other people did, and almost never what he does on its own. But this is crossing a line. On a more positive note for this whole space segment, however, at least Kratos stealing Asura's thunder wasn't a killing blow. No matter how much I criticize this episode, I will always take the timeline where even Kratos' strongest hit just slightly pushed Destructor Asura's back, rather than Kratos killing him with his bare hands, which I never thought was gonna be an option. Even Death Battle agrees that an XC tool will be required. The way Kratos charges up the spear throw was really well done. In fact, I really appreciate how much emphasis the drooping spear gets, since a spear is the first weapon a Spartan learns after all. It having the power to adjust the size depending on the opponent it's stabbing may be a Death Battle original idea, but hey, at least we now know that devilartemis would animate an awesome Gilgamesh, hopefully to kick Dr. Doom's ass. And while I don't think that Asura pulling a Wizen works, I do kinda like the juxtaposition of this climax where facing both Wizen and Kronos at once, the giants that Kratos and Asura are the most famous for defeating respectively. Also, side note, the old Kratos in space thingy, the reason why this black box felt weird to me is because he never fights Ares in space. That was just an illusion to break Kratos' spirit. Like in my first Asura video, I made the joke about power scalers immediately thinking that someone can create a universe just because they can create the illusion of a night sky with stars. And Death Battle deadass managed to do a version of that. Like, as far as research goes, I'm sorry, that's just abysmal. Hell, I don't even think Kratos would immediately die in space per se, but given how he needs magical artifacts to breathe underwater, I also don't think there was anything Kratos could have done if Asura did punch him out of orbit. Asura can fly and shoot energy blast from a distance, but even the Icarus wings need air to fly. Surprise surprise, there's no air in space. But much like there is nothing stopping Kratos from being carpet bombed by interplanetary projectiles, as he's never had to contend with such distances. And yet, in terms of overall visuals and music, this whole scene is as close as it gets to my expectations regarding how quote-unquote cosmic this fight should be. So that's nice. When things get back on the ground or whatever,
You are a monster no longer.
I never was.
Indeed you weren't, Asura, because I was just as lost as you were on what Kratos was talking about here. I get it, I am your monster no longer. But something this that the battle kinda fails to recognize is that just because I recognize something, that doesn't mean it's inherently worth your praise, you know? Asura's last words being the defiant "fuck you" He's 100% in character though, don't worry bro, I'm not angry with you. I'm talking to the guy who's not even bothering to extract the blade that's currently within your whipcage. And Mitra, what are you doing? Why aren't you mantra boosting your dad instead of watching him die? Oh, that's what the alternate ending is for. I have things to say about that one too. Something crossing bridges. The way this scene is presented, it's as if Asura became some kind of blind raging monster with no coherence, and Kratos just had to put him out of his misery or something, like Magneto vs Deathsword. But that's not Asura's character. That's not Asura at all. Especially since he had enough of a working mind to move the fight elsewhere in space instead of destroying the planet he swore to protect. That would be stupid. And especially compared to you, John Kratos. Yeah, full name basis, bitch. Forget godhood. Asura was a saint compared to you. Your past self was an asshole who constantly blamed everyone else for his problems, sold the memory of his wife with hollow sexcapades, abused his position as god of war, caused mass murder for every godly kill, made zero attempt to quell his rage up until the entire world paid for it, and even the closest thing to self-sacrifice was more akin to a fuck you to the ghost of one of your allies, which you murdered. Even the best possible version of you took 2 whole games and a DLC to move past your stubbornness and aloofness, which almost killed your son, by the way. Asura, meanwhile, was shown to be a great husband and father from the get-go. He mastered his anger, which Dead Battle rightfully highlighted. He's enraged about the pointless loss of innocent lives, never once lays a finger on them, and willingly sacrifices himself to save his daughter and stop the cycle of pain kickstarted by Chakravartin, staying laser focused about who and what he's fighting for from beginning to end. Kratos was a monster who learned to become a good person, but Asura was always a good person. Asura doesn't hate gods just because they're gods, but because they spread death and suffering amongst innocents for supremely petty reasons. Sounds like a certain someone, Jonathan Kratos. Okay. Now that I've had my Shrafilas production shouting at Megamind moment, we shall now interrupt your not so regularly scheduled Kratos vs Asura criticizing to go over the best part of this episode bar none. I don't think I can go over what makes Whitey so great without going over what makes In Your Belief, Asura's main theme, so great. Despite being the main theme for a character pretty much centered around anger and punching, I always love how it's a quiet, somber, and honestly pretty tragic composition instead of, say, aggressive rock or heavy metal. The focus isn't on the power or badassery of Asura, but the inherently tragic nature of someone who's been seen as a weapon his whole life, has an anger he doesn't know where the source of, gets betrayed by his own companions, has to grieve his wife and to be in prison for thousands of years, and with the only thing that keeps him going against all odds is not his anger per se, that's a fleeting emotion. No, it's the pure indignation against those who seek to rule the world and his pure love for his daughter above all else. That is the core of Asura's character. That is what he believes in. That is why the track is more melancholic and tender than it is grand or epic. It's actually all 4 of those things, by the way. Hence why I speak. In my Kratos vs Asura prediction video, I brought up how I don't really think Wrath of the Gods is a terribly fitting track for either Asura or Kratos, hoping for the official track to be something that had both 1. A more somber and tragic feel like In Your Belief, and B. A godlike chills-inducing feel befitting of a fight between legends, like One King to rule them all, fireborn and all-consuming, masterfully accomplished. Whitey, which means wet in Scandinavian, is a slow-paced, heavenly track that combines the low-pitched choir and heavy horns from God of War 2018 with the intense orchestra and female singing of Asura's Wrath. In the midst of the many criticisms this episode got, many say that Whitey was just too slow and quiet for an admittedly action-packed fight, to the point where it just kinda disappears in the background until the space fight at the end. On my side of things, this is partially everything I wanted out of a Kratos vs Asura track, as it checks the first box just fine. If you listen to Whitey on its own, it's as chill-inducing and captivating as it could have hoped for. Terrorwolf Media and his wife did an amazing job on that front. The lyrics, which he posted later on YouTube on the community tab, blend in the best of both characters' journey, their shared rage against the heavens, Kratos' past sins, Asura's love for his daughter, the sheer destruction these two can unleash, with the tint of sorrow still being present amidst the chaos. The title and lyrics may be in Norse, like in God of War 2018, but the tone and beats are 100% Asura's wrath. That's my praise for variety as a musical composition, but as a death battle track, it doesn't really work to accompany a fight. It picks up on the second half, sure, but that's kinda it, and I don't think it works as background for a fight as much as it does of a piece of music separated from an animation it was made for. It's less Kratos vs Asura in terms of song and more Kratos and Asura, which is great, but not what it was made for. You catch my drift? I still take this over generic walk though. Now, this is normally the part where I go over the narrative theme of this fight, aka what ideas do the combatants thematically represent, and why one triumphing over the other is thematic or cohesive with that clash, but since I have my gripes on whether the outcome makes sense within either the chosen interpretation or the material of both franchises, I'm gonna put this on hold for now, much like Omniman vs Bardock. By the time I'll do my season 2024/25/Kickstarter ranking, which aka season 24 and 25 combined, I will go over which teams I think these two fights represents, or any other episodes I don't feel like ranking by the time they came out, as by that time I probably have had enough months and months to figure something out. Alright, now onto the post-analysis slash debunking side of things, which may or may not be the reason you click on this video. Although the calculation methods they used to reach that outcome is peculiar to say the least, Kratos and Asura having equal speeds is something I also suggested in my prediction video, albeit under the assumption that you can interpret both of them being fast enough to surpass infinite distances. That battle went for the simpler route and just said they're both very much faster than light. Fair, no problems here. That said though, this whole thing of saying quote Kratos outsped Helios while showing him covering his face as he failed to dodge the first flash and slowly walking towards what's basically a crippled car crash victim is just extremely fucking stupid, and I do think he deserved every level of mockery and memes he got after the episode dropped. Like, come on guys. Like, if you wanna say that Kratos kept up with a god renowned for his speed, Heimdall was right there. Like, either that guy sees the future and Kratos still managed to somehow move faster than that, or his pure combat skill was so high caliber that not even precognition helped Heimdall that much. Regardless how you look at it, it's either a very impressive display of speed or combat skill on Kratos' side, and most importantly, it is him actually moving faster than someone, without that someone being a vegetable for once. Do I think it holds a candle to Asura dodging a star-destroying light beam in space? I mean, I don't really think you can quantify moving faster than future vision, but at least it's an actual display of speed, pretty iconic one too. But to say that Kratos is stronger, therefore is absorbing weapons will drain Asura faster, just feels disingenuous at best and headcanony at worst. In my Kratos vs Asura prediction video, I did bring up how Kratos' arsenal would potentially be able to drain godly/spiritual energy, with mantra protection being both, would be a problem for Asura, if it wasn't for the fact that Asura literally defeated the source that controls whole mantra, Chakravartin, whose death resulted in mantra no longer being a thing across the universe, including a now rat-free Asura, hence why he dies shortly after. To drain the mantra that's only in Asura's body, period, was never shown to be enough to put him down, as his rage literally preventing him from staying dead. Yasha and Deus recognize that mantra is not Asura's sole energy source, his anger is. It's a pretty difficult part to miss. In the manga, which they do use into their analysis, Asura is able to fight without a mantra core altogether, recovering mantra faster than Deus' device could drain and resurrected from being cut in half before his corpse even hits the ground. They were not wrong when they implied Kratos would need to disintegrate every piece of Asura to actually win. They just don't stick to it. Again, if the infinite Naraka or the omnipotent weaver of all mantra in existence were not able to take Asura's soul or mantra, then neither should any of Kratos' arsenal. This whole thing was honestly just taking one thing for granted for Kratos and not giving the same courtesy to Asura, which again I personally find that much worse than also giving Asura's full power set interpreted to the maximum and still lose. Actually, maybe that would be just as bad. It's kinda what they did with Super Saiyan Paradox, no? I am undecided on which is worse, by the way, comment down below. Now, the strength and power. This might come off as a shock to anyone who watched my prediction video, but there are arguments for Kratos being stronger than Asura that I actually agree with. I know, right? It's just that God of War power scalers, and unfortunately now that Battle 2, has the tendency to go for the worst example possible to support that. There's no need for weird SAP tree cookbook scaling calculations. The fact that Kratos can forcefully open the incorporeal gates of Valhalla with brute strength alone and fight on par with someone who can affect the very spice continuum is arguably beyond anything Asura ever displayed. However, when you're taking into consideration Asura's own strength, plus constantly breaking the laws of physics, destroying the infinite dimension of Naraka, and defeating an omnipotent being in end-to-end combat, my final stance on the topic is that they're both so strong that it doesn't really matter. If the Speed Force makes you affect reality with speed and Toon Force makes you affect reality with jokes, then I genuinely believe these two can affect reality by punching. Punch Force, if you will. There you go, a new term. Hell, for all my grievances with all the skilled Asura, they still put him at high universal level strength, which is considerably higher than any calculation I've ever seen done for Azuzu. I'm honestly just glad that battle has yet to plunge into the complex multi-hyperversal, outerversal and bullshit, not only because that stuff gets needlessly complicated for the general audiences that battle needs to cater to if you want to keep going, but like, please understand that it's vastly better to argue which character beats the other in the same plane of existence, instead of insisting that the difference in power is basically the same difference between me and Doodle Kratos, which is the whole dimensions apart. And the whole, well, Freyr can briefly stop Ragnarok and Kratos is certainly stronger than Freyr thingy, which I decided to call the Bowser-Yoshi effect, is an unexpected interpretation, but it does check out. There is the semblance of logical reasonings here and there in this breakdown. But then you have stuff like, why would they measure Chakravartin golden statue alone and not his final form? They framed it as if this was the final boss Asura had to fight, with occasional snippets of a weird silver guy he fought beforehand or something. This is the final boss, not this. Even with present day me having zero issues believing Kratos to be as strong as Asura if not more in basic form, there's still the titan in the room of ignoring Asura's rage-fueled strength growth, like when he went for the omnipotent Chakravartin, blocking Asura's strongest form with one finger, to hurting himself trying to hurt Asura's base form. Like, if you wanna give the W to Kratos, at least tell me you think Kratos has too much power for even Asura's throat to keep up with. Would I agree with that train of thought? Not in the slightest. But at least it is a train of thought, instead of giving Kratos a W against a nerf and mischaracterized portrayal of a character you literally had one game worth of material to research. One of the most controversial points I've seen regarding this episode is, believe it or not, whether or not it's biased towards Kratos or Asura. Those on the latter camp support their stance by highlighting how Asura gets the emotional moments with his daughter, dominates the climax in a giant monster form, gets the entire alternate ending to himself, and the boss analysis ends by sparking hope for an Asura SWAT 2. Like, I don't think I could disagree more. As I said when I went over the death, bigger does not mean better, and it's not coherent for Asura's character to attempt a Wizen on Kratos. He has emotional moments with his daughter, sure, but when the motivation and power up she usually provides for Asura ends with him not even leaving a single scratch on Kratos, it kinda doesn't mean jack shit. Kratos is a protagonist, the one who gets attacked, the one portrayed as reasonable, the one who gets all the cool moments and quotes throughout the fight. All the while Asura just bones through all these forms in 2 minutes, doesn't have the upper hand at any point in the fight, and leaves Kratos with 0 bruises to speak of. Whatever bias there might be in this fight is undeniably not on Asura. Sorry. Now, the alternate ending. Believe it or not, I still have mixed feelings of what I should think about it. On one hand, Asura killing Kratos is the outcome I buy more times than not. QTE are finally incorporated into the fight, the transition in which Kratos fades from Gaia to the afterlife gave me major God of War ragnarok vibes, and the fields of Elysium look pretty damn breathtaking, and I love the idea of both him and Asura ending the fight reunited with their daughters in one way or the other. On the other end, I've also seen people call this a charity ending, slap in the face for every loser in the show, pity damage control to make Asura fans less upset, and so on and so forth. Many say that Kratos, quote, just letting Asura punch him with no resistance doesn't feel like an earned victory either, but I personally interpret it more so as Asura moving so fast that Kratos appears to be unmoving as a statue, rather than just planting his foot on the ground until he felt like dying. Either way, sadly, another big mixed bag in an episode that's basically a mixed bag story. And but we do see gameplay Kratos match the level of power of Lord Kratos thingy, like, no guys, we don't. What we do see is Kratos killing gods via either special weapons, special circumstances, and with special interpretations of what such gods are capable of, regardless what's shown on screen. My biggest concern with that battle giving the victory to Kratos was that it was gonna embolden the worst side of the God War power scaling community, who more often than not tend to be toxic and vindictive. Despite the franchise being the vastly more successful one, the boy getting the W with reasonings as flimsy as Kratos is faster than someone who can't even walk. The only positive thing I can imagine sparking for this whole thing is people walking away from this episode wanting to check out /play /experience Asura's Wrath, which were Ben Singer's alleged intentions. And yeah, that's gonna be a victory no matter what. For today's bonus chapter, Devil's Advocate. If you remember the waiting period for this episode, they released a short trailer that included this voice line. While that's an amazing vocal performance from Guerrero, it's worth pointing out what it's actually saying. Death to all gods. Many were quick to point out how out of character that line is for Asura, since he's against cruel and tyrannical gods specifically, not the species as a whole. In what I think was an attempt to damage control, the animator devilartemis was quick to point out how that line was not gonna be in the actual episode, as he, quote, fought tooth and nail to preserve Asura's characterization. On one hand, it's obviously very awesome to see devilartemis about a character accurate portrayal for Azuzu, but why did he have to fight for it? Well, as we get into the storyboards he was tasked to animate, the answer for that will be clear soon enough. Now, a storyboard slightly differing for the finished product is nothing new for Death Battles, but this one is pretty interesting. Stuff like the DBZ double punch, Asura knocked the axe out of the way, Kratos breaking out to the first barrage with Spartan Rage, the reveal of Zuzu multiple arms, the blades emerging from the smoke, closing the ground like that one Bugs Bunny gif, Asura shooting last with the blade still inside him grabbing the blade with his mouth, Kratos not selling an Azuzu headbutt, Asura running up the pillar. Is it simpler than the Kratos vs Asura I imagined in my mind for these months? Yes. But there's still a lot of sauce and cool ideas in this one. Maybe a bit too much, like another 3D animator, not the slightest, but if I were asked to animate that, I would see it as quite a tall order to render in 3D. Between the parkour, energy effects, fast-paced action, specific cinematography, devilartemis definitely had his hands full with this one. So I wouldn't harp on this animation more than I already have, he did his absolute best. Unlike whoever decided that Asura hoing the same planet he swore to protect with his daughter still on it was anything near a good idea. Thankfully, this got corrected in the actual episode, with Asura teleporting Kratos somewhere in space instead, because random teleportation is a thing in this episode. Back on the storyboard however, even Kratos lampshades how Asura is essentially betraying his own planet, calling him lost and again killing him in what feels like a very putting the rapid dog down type of way, with a "you are a monster no longer" not being a one-liner as pieces of Asura fall from the sky. This is awful. This is honestly awful. Again, no hate whatsoever who drew these storyboards, and most certainly not on devilartemis, whose changes clearly led to avoiding what might have been the worst case of character assassination Death Battle history. But like, how am I supposed to look at what this battle was almost gonna be and not think that the writers for this episode watched 2 minutes of Asura's Wrath cutscene and called it a day, shitting on Asura's character to make Kratos come off as cool as possible? Like, guys, it's one game and one manga, how do you fuck this up? Multiple people saw this and deemed it an acceptable portrayal of the character. I just don't understand how this was possible. This isn't Asura. This is not Sura. Did we get the list of 2 evils in the episode proper? Obviously, and I wanna believe that the way to speak of Asura in the breakdown and post-analysis was them trying to course correct something they realized were too late to fix and postpone, especially with the Rooster Teeth being shut down and everything. But this should not happen. Back on the topic of devilartemis however, and I sincerely doubt you're watching this video, especially if you still test to animating all the 20 fights for season 11, which are now season 24 and 25, but I really hope that task doesn't end up being too much for you to handle, both on the quality side of things and most importantly your health side of things. Like, I'm not gonna associate devilartemis with this episode from now on, especially when he's responsible for cinematic masterpieces like Yoda Miki, Friezatron, Obi-Wan Kakashi, Pop Tama, Draculanon, and my personal favorite of all time, Obi Vader. I know he's gonna knock it out of the park most of the time, this is just an outlier, but I hope it's also not a bad omen for things to come, now that he's gonna have to carry the workload on its own. Granted, it can still be helped by guest animators, and it is only 1/3 of the animation styles that Battle can rely on, and there's also the 4-week waiting period which definitely helps, but you know, I hope for the best. In case we get other less than stellar 3D animated fights, please understand that devilartemis is doing his best and don't send any harassment towards him, or even the Death Battle writers that approved the not Sura as late as the storyboard changes. Criticize it all you want, hell, what do you think I'm doing, but be respectful and please remember we're all human in this. Like, even the closest thing resembling this episode in recent times, Omni Bardock, was still amazing in sound design, music, vocal performances, and honestly, yeah, animation in general. I think we're good, honestly. This episode is still a 6.5 out of 10 though. Sorry guys. Thanks for watching, drink lots of water, I'll do the same. I'll call Krypton, hope you made your day slightly better.